I'm Warren Sharp of sharpfootballanalysis.com, and this is going to be your new favorite football podcast. I've assembled a team of experts, and we're going to be dropping our best bets in college football, NFL sides, NFL totals, player props, and more, while analyzing some of the referees on some of these games and their impact. And I think it's going to be a ton of information, fun, and help you make some money this weekend while you enjoy and watch the games as well. This week, we're going to hit the Ole Miss at Georgia game, Utah at BYU, the Commanders at the Cowboys, the Giants at the Broncos, the Panthers at the Jets, and the Bucs at the Lions on Monday night, and much, much more, with bets, analysis, and logic for every single one of these picks. And by the way, I'm 27-10 so far over the last 2 years of doing this show, including 5-1 this year after dropping a game last week. We're looking to go to 6-1 by winning our best bet of the show, which you'll find later on in this episode. Before we get into that, we're bringing back another $100 giveaway. Last week, Jonathan O was our $100 winner by picking Travis Kelce to score the first touchdown in the Chiefs-Jags game on Monday night. Comment below who you think scores the first touchdown in the first Monday Night Football game between the Bucs and the Lions. So the first Monday Night Football game. Who scores the first touchdown? Put it in the comments to get a chance at receiving $100 added to your Novig account. Make sure you have a Novig account. If you don't, click the link below and you'll be able to get a $100 match when you sign up. That being said, let's go ahead and dive into the show. It's outstanding this week. I think you're going to love some of these bets. I feel really good about what we got cooked up for you. All right, before we dive into all of our favorite bets for this weekend's games in college and the NFL, we have to talk a little bit about this Thursday night game between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals put off a tremendous upset. This was one of the most entertaining and fun games between two quarterbacks who totaled the combined age of 81 years through a combined 7 touchdown passes in this game. And it was a lot of fun, back and forth. But there were some major puzzling factors here, and it mostly is on the Pittsburgh Steelers side of the ball, and it's mostly on the defensive side of the ball. After all, the offense did put up over 30 points, but on the defensive side of the ball, I do not understand this. This is the number one most expensive defense in the NFL. Their roster on that side of the football totals $163 million, number one in the NFL. $23 million more than the number two most expensive defense. They're going up against a quarterback who is Joe Flacco, who's 40 years old, who's been in town for 10 days, who's playing behind a bad offensive line. And he throws for 342 yards and 3 touchdowns against you. Inconceivable how your defense allows a quarterback to do that. Joe Flacco, after the game, admitted that he did not know a lot of the play calls. He did not know a lot of the formations that were being radioed into his headset. He's trying to figure it out on the fly and make things up. Now, funny aside here is that the read option that he kept the ball on and ended up getting a critical 11 yards on a 2nd and 10 at the end of the game, that was a play that he just ad-libbed because the defense blew it up. He understood what the play that was being radioed in was. He just kind of made it up. So that was a funny aside if you didn't catch that at the end of the game from Joe Flacco. But it started early on in the game. It started, in the first half, and then out of halftime, I'm working and I'm listening to the TV on one of my monitors, and I hear Mike Tomlin being interviewed coming out of the locker room. And he is suggesting that they need to stop the run. And he mentions multiple times, we need to stop the run to try to get them off schedule. And I'm thinking to myself, he can't be serious, right? And then the first play of the game out of halftime, the Bengals start with the football. The Pittsburgh Steelers walk 9 defenders into the box to try to stop the run. And I realized this guy's actually serious. He wants to try to stop the run. Keep in mind, at that point in time in the game, through the first half, the Cincinnati Bengals had 24 pass dropbacks, only 9 run plays. 9 runs, 23 passes, 1 sack, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to give up yardage in the passing game, and Joe Flacco is more than happy to pass the football all over this secondary if they're going to play man coverage against T. Higgins, man coverage against Jamar Chase. I mean, the Steelers really think that the Bengals are just going to turn into this run-first team in the second half, and the Steelers need to stop the run as their first and foremost priority. Joe Flacco clearly showed that he knew how to get the ball to these receivers, and these are still two of the best receivers. It's the best duo in the NFL, arguably. You've got to figure out a way to stop these guys. At another point in time, the Steelers still looked like they were trying to stop the run. Meanwhile, Joe Flacco had 36 dropbacks at that point in time. No Bengals running back had more than 7 rushing attempts. And here, Mike Tomlin is still trying to crowd the box and slow down the run game. And they aren't able to slow down the run game. I mean, they're getting run on by Chase Brown, who hasn't had much success running on anybody. And then through the air, they're being picked apart left and right to pretty much everybody under the sun, which goes back to the very first point of this, is that the Steelers have the number one most expensive defense, and they're getting shredded by a 40-year-old quarterback who's been in town for 10 days and a running back who's had no success running on anybody. And this was the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, and this was the coaching of the Pittsburgh Steelers after the game. I don't know if you remember, there was a critical play in the game where the Steelers had just scored to cut the lead down, and the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Flacco threw this beautiful ball deep down the middle to Andre Yoshivas for a huge gain on a critical play. And on that play, the Steelers had bracketed both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So they doubled both of those players on the outside. One was on the left, one was on the right. Singled up Andre Yoshivas over the middle. Joe Flacco identified that. There was no help over the top and threw the ball right over the top to Andre Yoshivas, who was tackled from behind. Otherwise, he scores a walk-in touchdown. And after the game, Richard Sherman was wondering, what in the world are the Pittsburgh Steelers doing? They've got this $23 million cornerback in Jalen Ramsey that they paid. Why are you utilizing him as part of a double team on Jamar Chase when, if you're going to double up Jamar Chase, fine, use your best corner, Jalen Ramsey, on the single man Andre Yoshivas? Why are you putting a subpar corner covering Andre Yoshivas, who's getting burned, and wasting Jalen Ramsey in a double team? So Richard Sherman, obviously a lot of experience at cornerback, far more than I have, was questioning the coaching methods of the Pittsburgh Steelers and their strategies for this game. Then you fast forward a few plays, or like a couple series, you have on the other side of the 2-minute warning, the Cincinnati Bengals have the ball, and all they need is a field goal. They're trailing 31 to 30. They just need a field goal to win the game. 2 minutes left, and they have a wide open Jamar Chase. I mean, nobody's within 15 yards of him. I took a screenshot, tweeted out. It is mind-boggling how your number one receiver, mind you, he had 20 targets at that point in time. I'm not missing 20 targets at this point in time in the game. And you have nobody within 15 to 20 yards of him when he catches the football. He turns and runs up the field, huge chunk gain. All of a sudden, the Cincinnati Bengals are in field goal range. In fact, the Cincinnati Bengals started with their football at their own 30-yard line. And in three plays, they moved the ball to the Pittsburgh Steelers 7-yard line. A 15-yard pass, an 18-yard pass, and a 28-yard pass moves the ball from the Cincy 30-yard line to the Pittsburgh 7-yard line, where they obviously iced the game with some kneel downs and a field goal. This game, I mentioned the 20 targets to Jamar Chase. He finishes with 23 targets. And I tweeted out a funny analogy because I used to work in the engineering world. And a lot of times we were brought in as an outside consultant to try to help fix a problem for an owner, a contractor, somebody who was having problems with what they were doing internally. And they needed a separate set of eyes that might be a little bit more experienced to help troubleshoot and problem solve. That was Joe Flacco to a T. The Cincinnati Bengals hired an outside consultant to fix their supply and demand issues. They needed to figure out a way to get Jamar Chase the football and to keep Jamar Chase happy, even though they might not win a lot of games this year. They go out, they bring in Joe Flacco, all of a sudden 23 targets, an absurd number. I want to say it's like the most since like the 90s or something for a single receiver to have 23 targets in a game. Joe Flacco dropped back a ton. TJ Watt only had 2 pressures. It was his lowest pressure rate in any game this season on Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is dropping back. He threw the ball quickly, under 2.5 seconds on 21 of 31 of his throws, gained 222 yards, including all 3 of his touchdown passes. So it was quick read, diagnose the defense, figure out where you're going with the football. Joe Flacco's arm is great, and his brain is still there to figure out what is this defensive coverage that I'm looking at? Where should I be going with the football? Executed it to a T. On the other side of the ball, Aaron Rodgers, I mean, there was not really any issue with Aaron Rodgers' game either. The way that Arthur Smith had dialed things up, they were attacking the middle of that Cincinnati Bengals defense, and they were having a lot of success in throws to the middle of the field. 77% completions, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions when Aaron Rodgers was throwing the ball between the numbers. But when Aaron Rodgers, after that first big completion down the sideline on the very first drive of the game where the Steelers marched and scored a touchdown, he hit DK Metcalf. And that's sort of actually like a dangerous thing for a guy like Aaron Rodgers, because now he thinks, like, I could throw the ball anywhere. I could just put this ball anywhere. And he ended up throwing 2 interceptions. Both of them came outside the numbers. On throws outside the numbers, Aaron Rodgers, only 50% completions, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So 4 touchdowns between the numbers, 0 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions outside the numbers. Definitely a problem for Aaron Rodgers when he was trying to push the ball down the field outside the numbers. Much more successful between the numbers. These 2 quarterbacks, as I mentioned, just a historic night to watch these gunslingers from. A lot of us have been watching football for a while. Years ago, we remember these guys in their prime. To see them still throwing and combining for nearly 600 yards at a combined 81 years of age, 7 passing touchdowns is remarkable. One final little nugget here that I've talked about for a while in different ways, like not this nugget specifically. This is the first time I heard of this specific statistic related to Mike Tomlin. It has now been 56 straight games where the Pittsburgh Steelers has scored 7 points or fewer in the first quarter. That is tied for the longest streak in NFL history for any head coach. To have a team, and think about this, like, yes, there aren't that many possessions that occur in the first quarter of a game to score that many more points than 7. But that being said, to go 56 straight games and never have a game where you scored on both of your first quarter possessions, kicked a field goal maybe, scored a touchdown on the other, had a defensive takeaway that you ran in for a touchdown, or that you stopped and were able to kick a field goal because you got a 3 and out, or you got a takeaway and got great field position as a result of that. To go 56 straight games without scoring more than 7 points in the first quarter, I mean, it sounds crazy to me. It's a record. It's insane to me that Mike Tomlin's team is not more aggressive early on in games and just hasn't had one game in 56 that they've been able to do that. So I was excited to watch the game, to see what was going to happen. I wasn't expecting this level of a shootout. But I absolutely would color myself disappointed in the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Obviously, great for Joe Flacco, great for his family, great for the Cincinnati Bengals. Hilarious that Mike Tomlin was so against this trade before it even happened. He knew he went up against Joe Flacco for very many years. He did not want to face Joe Flacco. He made comments publicly, which are very rare, disparaging the front office of the Cleveland Browns for executing this trade during the season to a division rival from Cleveland to Cincinnati ahead of this game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Cleveland, now, I got some more thoughts on what they might be doing in terms of ownership and general manager trying to force Shedeur Sanders onto the field. Once you get rid of Joe Flacco, there's only Dillon Gabriel left ahead of Shedeur Sanders. And if Dillon Gabriel goes poor, faulty, or anything like that, all of a sudden now Shedeur is in there, and maybe they really want to see Shedeur. Maybe Kevin Stefanski doesn't want to put Shedeur in there, wasn't going to do that right away. And so now the ownership has helped make that process expedited by getting rid of Joe Flacco. That's just spitballing by me. I'm not sure if that's how things actually are going down in that building. But suffice it to say, I mean, this was a must-win game for the Cincinnati Bengals. Do I think that they're going to go over their win total and make the playoffs with Joe Flacco at quarterback? Probably not. Was I shocked to see them play this good offensively? Yes, I was. But it sort of goes back to the thought process of, if you got a decent receiver out there, why don't you just have a quarterback who just targets the crap out of him? Like, why aren't we seeing some more coaches get nutty with it and just say, look, who cares if we end up losing this game, but we're not going to waste run plays doing nothing. I mean, in this case, they had some success on the ground, but some of these coaches get so conservative with a decent receiver out there because they don't want their quarterback to get exposed. They want to stay balanced and try to run the football. And Zach Taylor and the Cincinnati Bengals are like, we brought in Joe Flacco so that we could chuck the ball, and we're going to chuck the ball, and we're going to throw it to Jamar Chase. And great things happen. You saw there was like one or two drops that he had where he probably should have caught the ball. And even Joe Flacco was like, that's weird that he dropped it. And there's a number of catches where it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he caught that one. There was that catch over by the sideline that it looked like he should have caught after they challenged it. It looked like a completion. They went to replay, timeout, and came back. And his hands actually left the ball for a split second, so it was an incompletion. This guy was making catch after catch after catch. You got talented receivers like that, you might as well just try to get in the ball as much as possible because the benefit outweighs the other option of handing the ball off to any type of running back. So it'll be interesting to see where the Cincinnati Bengals go from here. Pittsburgh Steelers, though, going to be left scratching their head. They've got a lot of time to think about this, being that this was a Thursday game. Got some extra time to try to figure out what exactly is going to be going on with this defense. Terrell Austin, their defense coordinator, I highly doubt Mike Tomlin makes any sort of change during the season, but there are a lot of people online after some of the stuff I tweeted out and some other people tweet out saying that Mike Tomlin needs to get rid of Terrell Austin, fire the defensive coordinator, look to go to a different direction. I don't think that happens at all, but certainly if you're looking to point a finger, who's responsible for this loss? Joe Flacco is responsible for the win. Coaching staff of the Bengals responsible for the win and giving Joe Flacco what he could handle. But the loss goes on Mike Tomlin. The strategy defensively to play so much man coverage against Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, not able to get pressure on Joe Flacco to try to play to stop the run inexplicably when the Bengals would rather just pass the ball on you. And Terrell Austin for some of the concepts and the play calls they made on that defensive side of the ball. So that's Thursday night. Looking back, let's look ahead now to some of the key storylines for Week 7 in the games on Sunday. And just make sure that you hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying this content. We've got a lot more to talk about with these Sunday games and some of our best bets over the course of the weekend. So stick around.
We have a special deal lined up for you this week, and it's the only time this season we're going to give you an all-access opportunity like this. Right now, if you go to sharp.football and use coupon code SHOW20, SHOW20, you can claim a full week of complete all access to our site for just $20. $20 will get you access to all of my NFL and college betting recommendations and all of our fantasy football analysis. We've produced profit for clients in 5 of our 6 weeks so far, and a $100 bettor has won $3,829 following my betting recommendations this season. That is an average profit of $640 per week. We typically get stronger as the season goes on. You do not want to miss out on another winning week, and you can get on board for all access for just $20. Use code SHOW20 over at sharp.football. All right, guys, as I've told you before, strength of schedule does start to matter, and it's a great thing to calculate and to integrate into your analysis moving forward now that we're hitting Week 7. And I'll start to do that. And one of the aspects I want to talk about first is the Detroit Lions as they take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I was a bit underwhelmed, and I've shared this with you guys on some of the other YouTube videos I did earlier this week about the offensive game plan that John Morton brought to the table in Kansas City in one of his first true tests on the road. I was not very impressed by his very low utilization of play action, the leaning into the run game on first downs when it clearly wasn't working, and passing the football was having far more success. And obviously it ended up costing them at the end of the day against the Kansas City Chiefs. The other thing that I know we feel good in general about the Detroit Lions, despite that loss, because this is a good team, but I want to show you a strength of schedule graphic that I've got right here. And what you can see is that starting with week 1 over here, the Detroit Lions have played 4 teams that rank very poorly in terms of total efficiency, weeks 2 through 5. And they won those games in blowout fashion in most cases. But they lost to a very good team that ranks well in total efficiency, the Green Bay Packers, earlier this year. They only scored 13 points on offense. They also then just lost against the 10th rated overall team, the Kansas City Chiefs, and they scored only 17 points in that game. They're about to embark on a schedule against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Minnesota Vikings, and then the Washington Commanders, all of which are good teams that have ranked well in terms of total efficiency so far this season. John Morton better come ready to have more success and make more adjustments to the weaknesses of those defenses, because it's one thing beating up on the likes of the Chicago Bears defense or the Cincinnati Bengals defense or the Baltimore Ravens defense. It's a very different thing trying to take on some of these better, more well-rounded teams out there. And they're 0-2 when they've stepped up in class so far this year. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a bit of a step up in class from those prior 4 opponents that they played before the Kansas City Chiefs. They're not quite the same level of play as the Chiefs or the Green Bay Packers, but it'll be interesting to see what the Detroit Lions bring to this game. Specifically, one of the things I'm focused in on is how much are they going to utilize play action here? Because, I told you last week's show that the Kansas City Chiefs were the dead last defense against play action passes, and the Detroit Lions use play action at the highest rate. Well, the Detroit Lions didn't use it nearly enough as they should have, even though it was very successful. You know who's the second worst team against play action? The Chiefs were number 1. It's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who the Detroit Lions play this week. So they're playing back-to-back games against teams that are terrible defending play action. I think it was a regret for the Lions that they didn't use enough play action a week ago. Hopefully they change that at home on Monday night and utilize a lot of play action and have success against this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. This week, the New England Patriots and Mike Vrabel will travel back to the scene of the crime, Nashville, Tennessee, to take on the Tennessee Titans, the team that Mike Vrabel coached for, the team that fired Mike Vrabel as well. Now, a lot of people are so in love with the fact that this New England Patriots passing attack looks phenomenal, and Drake May looks like he could be the real deal, that they're overlooking a couple of other critical aspects to this Patriots team that are problematic. They can't run the football. They haven't had much success so far this year. And their pass defense has been terrible. Their pass defense allows 72% completions, which is 30th in the league, and 8.3 yards per attempt, which is 31st in the league. So teams are having a lot of success passing on this Patriots secondary. Now, the interesting aspect to this game, the Patriots are a very pass-first team offensively, but their pass defense isn't great. There might be a little bit of wind in this game in Nashville. That wind could help their secondary not give up yards to Cam Ward and the Tennessee Titans offense, which is not very difficult to not give up yards to Cam Ward and the Tennessee Titans passing attack, because they struggle to gain yards even in a great weather situation, which, by the way, the Tennessee Titans have played 3 straight games in domes. Go back and look it up. They've played 3 straight road games, but all of them have been in domes, and now they're going to play in a windy environment. So that might wreak havoc even further with that passing attack for the Titans. But that wind might impact the Patriots' ability to have a lot of success passing the football themselves. So they're going to have to figure out a way to incorporate more shorter passes potentially, as well as get something more out of the run game than they have in prior weeks if this wind kicks up. So something to monitor. It might help their defense a little bit, but it also might hurt what they've been leaning on offensively. They may have to find some pivots. I do trust Josh McDaniels to do that. There is a massive game this weekend between the Minnesota Vikings off of a bye, probably being led by Carson Wentz, the former Philadelphia Eagle, and the Philadelphia Eagles, who are coming to town. One aspect of this game that you need to be aware of is the defensive scheme that Minnesota utilizes and how the Philadelphia Eagles, specifically Jalen Hurts, have fared against that. Philadelphia passing attack, though it hasn't been good, is about league average versus everything other than 2 high defenses. But when they pass the ball against a 2 high structure, they rank 29th in EPA per pass attempt. That's fourth worst in the NFL. Minnesota uses by far the number one highest rate of too high defense. Additionally, Minnesota blitzes at one of the highest rates in the NFL, but they don't man blitz very much. They zone blitz, obviously, because they play a lot of zone. They use zone blitzes on 80% of their blitzes, the second highest rate in the NFL. Jalen Hurts is averaging only 6.9 yards per pass attempt versus zone blitzes, which ranks 23rd in the NFL. But against man blitzes, he's averaging 8.7 yards per attempt, which ranks 7th best. So if you're just looking at how does Jalen Hurts do against the blitz, because I know that Minnesota blitzes at the second highest rate in the NFL, it's probably going to give you numbers that aren't really going to predict the true performance of Jalen Hurts against Minnesota's style of blitzes, because what you really do need to do here is separate out man blitz from zone blitz. He's not going to see the man blitzes where he's excelled. He's going to see the zone blitzes where he has struggled to the tune of 6.9 yards per attempt. So they play a lot of too high. Jalen Hurts struggles against that. They use a lot of zone blitzes. Jalen Hurts struggles against that. It'll be fascinating to see if Jalen Hurts can overcome both of those things in this 1 week game against the Minnesota Vikings and have some success, or if the defensive structure continues to stymie this Philadelphia Eagles offense, which really has not pulled anything together for a solid 4 quarters in a single game yet this year. When Bryce Young leaves the comfy confines of his home stadium, where he's been the 2 last weeks, and goes on the road to New York, he is going to need to try to figure out a way to put up some points offensively early, which is something that's plagued him throughout his career. The good news for the Carolina Panthers is they're going up against the New York Jets, who have similar massive issues at producing points early in games. I've got some of these statistics from Rich Rebar's game preview, which you can read over at Sharp Football Analysis, but let me share some of these with you. Carolina is third worst as a team in first half point differential. In total, they're losing by 57 points at halftime across all of their games. They have scored, however, 8 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and typically come back in games late. Well, the Jets themselves have scored 7 offensive touchdowns in the fourth quarter of games, tied for the third most, and just 4 touchdowns in the first 3 quarters of games, which is the second lowest total of any team. These are 2 teams that start games extremely slowly. And therefore, it's actually sort of a benefit. It's going to be fun to watch how they respond, because neither one is likely to fall behind by a massive amount early on, which is what typically happens for both of these teams and both of these quarterbacks. Will they then be able to lean a little bit more on the run game? Will the quarterbacks both have a little bit more confidence because they aren't trailing so early on in some of these games? It's going to be a fascinating situation to monitor, and one that's going to be intriguing from a prop betting perspective as well when Carolina travels to take on the Jets. If you watched the show last week, you probably know that Justin Herbert rushing yards was our prop of the week, and that did not come home for us. I was expecting that we were going to get a lot of blitzes and pressure from the Miami Dolphins on the Los Angeles Chargers offensive line that was down multiple starters, and that Justin Herbert would be running a little bit more. But something interesting happened. The Chargers decided to change their strategy with which they're passing the football. As opposed to pushing the ball deeper down the field and holding on to the football longer, they really shortened their target depth. And that allowed Justin Herbert to sit in the pocket more and just pick apart the Dolphins defense and pretty much, to a degree, do what the Dolphins do to other defenses to the Dolphins defense themselves. You remember, Tua doesn't hold on to the football very long, and Tua throws relatively short. It's a quick passing attack from the Miami Dolphins because their offensive line isn't very good, and they don't want Tua to get any more hits or take unnecessary sacks given his prior concussion issues. Well, Greg Roman and the LA Chargers, they sort of stole that template and have begun to use it in recent weeks. Justin Herbert, to start the year, averaged 10.1 in week 1 air yards per attempt, 9.0 and 9.1 air yards per attempt in his first 3 games. It was down all the way at 5.8 air yards per attempt last week. And the week before that, in fact, it was at 3.8 air yards per attempt. Now, That week was when the offensive lineman went down in the game. And so the passing attack was a little bit disjointed. But with the backups in there last week, again, this passing attack that was averaging over 10, 9, 9.1 air yards per attempt dropped all the way down to 5.8 air yards per attempt. That's going to be something that's interesting to watch how they perform now at home against the Indianapolis Colts pass rush and Indianapolis Colts defense, whose secondary has been devastated with a variety of injuries, including one of the players getting a concussion during pregame warmups last week and missing last week's game. Will Charvarius Ward be available to the Indianapolis Colts secondary this week? But in either case, Justin Herbert has had lower pressure the last couple of weeks, only 30.8 and 32.4% in each of the last 2 weeks. Not because his O-line is good, but because he's been shortening the target depth and getting the ball out faster. Later on in this episode, we are going to be talking about Jackson Dart and his rushing yardage prop. I'm going to reutilize this statistic now that we'll talk about down in that section as well, that Jackson Dart last week joined Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts as the only 3 quarterbacks in NFL history to run for 50-plus yards in each of the first 3 starts of their career. But one thing happened for Jackson Dart in that third game this past week. He got that injury on the sideline where he hit his head. Was it a concussion? Wasn't a concussion? The doctors cleared him. He came back out of the tent. While he was in the tent, we saw Russell Wilson get inserted onto the field and look terrible. Now, it was just one pass play, but Brian Daboll, as soon as he saw what happened, spun around and made a beeline back to that tent to find out, is Jackson Dart going to get cleared? Because I need Jackson Dart out on the field. We need to make a decision if we're going to go for it on 4th down. Can we get him out here, or are we not going to be with Jackson Dart in this game? The Giants want Jackson Dart healthy and out on the field because they believe it gives them the best chance to win. But Jackson Dart scrambling as recklessly as he's been doing the last several weeks won't allow him to stay on the field very much longer, especially if he continues to take those hits. Will Jackson Dart slide down a little bit more? Will he fight for those extra couple of yards, given what happened just last week on Thursday on prime time? They're heading out to Denver, playing a very difficult Denver Broncos defense as 7-point underdogs, which might mean Jackson Dart is dropping back to pass the ball at a fair rate due to the game state. Will he take care of himself? Will the coaching staff help encourage him to take care of himself by not running unnecessarily when you don't need to? I know Brian Daboll loves for quarterbacks to gain some free yards on the ground. One of the best plays in the NFL is when a designed passer dropping back to pass sees an open run lane between the defensive linemen and takes off. Those are slam dunk 8.5 to 9.5 on average yards per play, which is as good as some of the best quarterbacks are averaging in most games throwing the ball down the field. Those are slam dunks, but you've got to have your quarterback slide. You've got to keep him out of harm's way so that he can stay in the game and continue to have success for you. I'm really fascinated to watch how Jackson Dart runs with the football against the Denver Broncos this weekend and what that coaching staff might have done to make some adjustments to try to keep Jackson Dart upright. All right, now joining me is our college football betting expert, Ryan McChrystal. Reminder, you can find more of Ryan's recommendations over at sharpfootballanalysis.com, where he has detailed write-ups for multiple games every single week from a college football perspective, talking about analytics, data, edges, matchups. It's an outstanding read every single week. Highly encourage you to go check it out. For his first bet this week, we're looking at a massive game in the SEC between Ole Miss and Georgia. The current line on this game is Georgia laying 7.5 points at home. And Ryan is looking to take the underdog here, where 5th-ranked Ole Miss, they are 6-0, but they haven't won in Athens, Georgia since 1996, Ryan. And it's going to be a tough environment for D2 transfer Trinidad Chambliss, who doesn't have a single pass attempt in a road game at this level. Now he's going to have to do it in front of 93,000 fans in Georgia. You do like the underdog here, catching the 7.5 points. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, I like the road dog here, and I think Ole Miss might even have a chance to win this game outright. The main reason why I like it is the fact that Ole Miss is built around the passing attack, right? That's Lane Kiffin's style. He wants to throw the ball. He's dialed it back a little bit this year. Last year he had a 3-year starter in Jackson Dart at quarterback. This year he's got a transfer from D2. So he's scaled it back a little, but they're still a pass-first type of offense. And that's exactly what's given Georgia problems so far this year. They have not been able to defend the pass nearly as well as they used to. And I think it really starts in the deep secondary with Georgia. We're used to seeing Georgia go out there with safeties like Tyke Smith, Javon Bullard, Malachi Starks. Those guys set the tone for the defense for a long time at Georgia under Kirby Smart. There just doesn't seem to be that guy in the defensive secondary for them this year. And so they've struggled. Look at who Georgia has struggled with so far this year. Their toughest games was against Tennessee. They went into overtime against Tennessee. That's a downfield passing team, one of the best passing attacks in the conference this year. And they lost to Alabama. Ty Simpson is probably the best quarterback in the SEC. He gave Georgia problems. They ultimately lost that game on their home turf. And if you look around the whole conference, there's 3 teams in the SEC averaging 300 or more yards per game. It's Alabama, Tennessee, and now Ole Miss. So we saw Georgia already struggle to contain those first 2 passing attacks. Are probably going to struggle with Ole Miss. Now, why can't they defend the pass? We should look into it a little bit deeper to see if there's anything that Ole Miss does specifically that can exploit this Georgia secondary. First, I mentioned the secondary. It's not up to the Georgia standards. It doesn't have that early first or second round pick like we've seen them have so many times in the deep secondary. But I think it really starts with the pass rush. Looking at opponent adjusted data here, Georgia ranks 73rd in pressure rate generated on defense this year. That's not what you expect from a Georgia defense, right? You expect them to have, almost every single year come NFL draft time, we're talking about a Georgia edge rusher. They don't really have that type of guy this year. They certainly don't have the depth in that position this year. It's just not a very strong unit. There's 43 SEC pass rushers this season with double-digit pressures. Only one of them plays for Georgia. That's just not typical of a Georgia team. This is not the same Kirby Smart defense. Now, Ole Miss on the other side in this matchup, they excel at protecting Chambliss. They rank 18th in opponent adjusted pressure rate allowed. Some of that is the offensive line. Some of it also just the scheme. Kiffin is great at getting his quarterbacks to get the ball out quickly, which naturally limits pressure. So it's going to be really tough for Georgia to get pressure on Chambliss. Now, the other factor here is Georgia has not been very good at defending after the catch this season, which is critical against the Lane Kiffin offense. What he does best is get his receivers into space. So you better be able to wrap up and tackle those receivers and prevent short gains from turning into big plays down the field. Georgia ranks 92nd in yards after catch per reception. That is a huge red flag. As I said, Kiffin's offense is designed to get the ball in space, designed to produce yards after contact. And sure enough, this year's deep receiving core is producing. They rank 2nd in the nation in yards after catch per reception. Huge mismatch in that area. So if Georgia can't really get pressure to disrupt the pass, they can't really wrap guys up quickly and prevent those yards after catch, prevent those short passes from turning into bigger gains, I don't see how they're going to be able to stop this Ole Miss pass defense. Now, on the other side of the ball, Ole Miss has some flaws on defense. Maybe Georgia can keep pace, but I don't think Georgia at any point in this game is going to be able to pull away just because I don't think they can stop this Ole Miss passing attack. So I'll take the road underdog with a touchdown and a half here. Give me the Ole Miss, and I like their chances to pull out the upset even.
Wow, that would be amazing. As I said, first time since 2006 that they would have been able to do that. So really interesting if they could get that win. All right, next up, we're going to go to the Holy War, Utah BYU. This isn't quite Catholics versus convicts, Ryan, but really big rivalry here. This is the first time that this is the Holy War between these two teams where both have been ranked since 2009. Last year, BYU narrowly won 22-21 when they met. Now Utah is looking to give BYU their first loss of the season. You think that Utah can do it? They are a road favorite. You got to hunt for the best number here because at some of these spots, you have to lay -3.5, but at others, -116, -117 if you want to lay it with Utah, and you do want to lay it. Talk to us about why that is.
Yeah, really cool game on Saturday night between these two teams. Really underrated rivalry in college football. It doesn't get a lot of attention because they're not both ranked like this very often. But the fact that we get it this year is fantastic. Both of these teams definitely in contention in the Big 12 race to potentially get a playoff spot. And this game will play a huge factor in deciding that. I'm willing to lay the points mostly because I really like what Utah has done on the offensive side of the ball this year. They brought in Jason Beck as their new offensive coordinator. They moved on from Andy Ludwig, who had been with Kyle Whittingham for quite a while. And Utah had been running this slow, outdated, run-heavy offense for too long, and it was really dragging the program down because it had just become too predictable. Everybody knew exactly what they were going to do on offense. So they go outside the program and bring in Jason Beck, a guy who could come in and modernize the system. It's still a run-heavy offense. It's still basically what you would expect from a big picture standpoint from Kyle Whittingham's team. He wants to run the ball and play good defense. They're still trying to do that. They're just doing it in a more modern way. So, let's look at what they're doing exactly here. The biggest difference here is they're using RPOs. In this era of college football, you better be using RPOs. If you're not, that's just negligent coaching. And sure enough, that's what was happening at Utah last year. 1 out of every 4 plays across college football is an RPO. That's passing and running. 1 out of every 4 plays is utilizing RPOs in some form or another. Utah, however, last year was stuck in the dark ages using RPOs 2.7% of the time. Like I said, negligent coaching from Andy Ludwig. They bring in a younger, more modern coach in Jason Beck. They're using it 17% of the time last year. It's actually a little bit below average across the sport as a whole. 17% is a dramatic change from that 2.7%. I think that helps them in this matchup because BYU ranks 41st in yards per play allowed to RPOs. Not terrible, but they've played a really bad schedule so far this year. So that's a little bit of a red flag that maybe this is something Utah can exploit. The other factor is in the quarterback run game, which has never been a part of Utah's offense. Devin Dampier, however, came over to Utah from New Mexico with Beck. So he already knew the offense. It's why he's been able to transition in so seamlessly this year, because he's basically a coach on the field for them, already helping his Utah teammates learn this offense, which he already ran. He's already had 40 designed runs called for him. If you look at all of his runs across the board, excluding sack, he's averaging just over 10 per game, but 40 designed runs. That's a huge change from what we've seen from Utah. Going back the previous decade, Utah had never had a quarterback reach more than 47 designed runs in a season. That was Tyler Huntley back in the day. So this is a new wrinkle that no one's really seen from a Utah offense before. Depending on how this game goes, Dampier could surpass Huntley's number in this game alone midway through the season. This is critical in this matchup also because BYU's been a little bit vulnerable to these more athletic quarterbacks. We specifically saw it when they had a tough game against Colorado, barely snuck by a Colorado team with a losing record. It's probably not going to go to a bowl this year. They had trouble in that matchup. And containing Caden Salter was a big part of that. Salter had 14 carries for 84 yards. 6 of those carries produced a first down. BYU actually trailed for much of that game until I pulled out a tight 24-21 victory late in that game. It was giving them problems. And so these little changes that Beck has made has just turned Utah into one of the most efficient offenses in the country. Looking at it from more of a big picture perspective now, only 12% of Utah's sets of downs have resulted in a 3rd and long situation. That's the best rate in the nation, right ahead of Ohio State and Indiana, who might be the 2 best teams in the country. To give you an idea of just how efficient they have been on those early downs, having that effective run game, using RPOs, using the quarterback running game, that's a big part of that, putting yourself into manageable 3rd down situations at worst, if not picking up early first downs. But then the part that really stands out to me, and I love the fact that these 2 stats combined for Utah, when they do end up in a 3rd and long situation, which obviously isn't happening often, but when they do end up in 3rd and long, they lead the nation in 3rd and long conversion rate. That's an incredible combination to be avoiding 3rd and long at the highest rate, but also leading the nation in 3rd and long conversion rate. It just speaks volumes about what Beck has done for this offense, having them prepared for every situation. So ultimately, I think this is going to be the matchup that exposes BYU as a little bit of a fraud. They haven't really played anybody to earn this undefeated record at this point. I think they're probably a little bit overrated in the polls. So I think Utah covers this spread, ends up winning this game relatively easily thanks to Beck's offense.
That's a lot of fun. I love watching innovation on the offensive side of the ball and the importance of coaching, why I think coaching matters so much, play calling, scheming, and like you mentioned, going from something that was relatively indistinguishable as appropriate offense with the lack of RPOs to something that's a lot higher rate now and more acceptable. And some of those stats you threw out, definitely very compelling, Ryan. So we'll look to back you here and lay it with Utah on the road in what should be a very fun game on Saturday night. As a reminder, guys, you could check out more of Ryan's outstanding analysis over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. go to the website, check out more game previews and articles that he's got up there. And as always, we appreciate your time, Ryan. Good luck this weekend, and we'll talk to you next week. This season, we've partnered with Novig, America's #1 sports prediction market, to give you an exclusive opportunity to try out their platform. They are offered in many states that sportsbooks are not allowed, including California, Texas, Florida, Georgia, and more. And right now, you can get a $100 purchase match with code WARREN when you sign up. Just click the Novig link in the description of the show below to get your $100 match when you open a new account. And don't forget, comment below who you think scores the first touchdown in the Bucs-Lions game on Monday Night Football to win an extra $100. Now joining me is our fantasy football guru and member of the Sharp Prop Squad, Rich Rebar. We're going to be going over some of his favorite prop bets for the week. And as a reminder, you can find all of Rich's insanely great fantasy analysis up at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Let's dive right into it, Rich. The first prop that you like this week has to do with a quarterback, but not his arm, more so his legs. And that's Jackson Dart, who has hit 50-plus yards in each of his first 3 games, joining Lamar Jackson as Jalen Hurts as the only 2 quarterbacks who ran for 50-plus yards in each of the first 3 starts of their career. Obviously, some great company there, but you're actually not looking to ride with Mr. Dart. You're looking to fade Mr. Dart here. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about why you like his under 40.5 rushing yards over in Denver on Sunday afternoon?
Yeah, we already know this is going to be a tough passing matchup for the Giants against that great Denver pass rush and pass defense. But if you're looking for Dart to bail himself out with his legs in this real tough matchup, Denver has been equally as impressive against mobile quarterbacks. They've held Daniel Jones to 2 yards, Justin Herbert to 6 yards, Jalen Hurts to 3 yards, Justin Fields to 31 yards. And this isn't just a 2025 thing. This is all 2 full seasons and the 6-game sample with Vance Joseph in Denver. Only one quarterback has ever hit this number against the Denver Broncos, and that was Anthony Richardson, 46 yards last year. They faced Lamar Jackson last year. He had 4 yards. They faced Josh Allen twice in that span. They faced Justin Fields 3 times in that span, and none of those guys have gotten there in this spot either. I don't know what the recipe is, but Denver is just not giving up production on the ground to these running quarterbacks. So I'm going to look to take advantage of Dart's, inflate everyone talking about that stat that you laid out and them announcing it on the broadcast. I want to take advantage of that, and hopefully we come in a little bit under and catch some value here.
Yeah, the other thing too, Rich, this was circled on my sheet. When I saw it was one of the ones that you liked, I was like, oh my God, what are the odds? I like this one also. But one of the great things about this one, in my opinion, we just saw Jackson Dart get concussed last week. Obviously, that's not great. But the fact of the matter is there might be a little bit of hesitation in Daboll encouraging Jackson Dart. Just go out there and run around, try to pick up some yards after seeing what Russell Wilson did when he came into the game and was inserted. I think the last thing Daboll wants is Russell Wilson out on the field in Denver where he played previously and looks terrible to have to do that again. They need to protect Jackson Dart a little bit better. Maybe run, but not as often or not as recklessly trying to fight for those extra yards. So I like this one as well. We'll stick in the same game and look at a receiver, but on the other side of the football, we'll look at Courtland Sutton. And in this matchup, you like Courtland Sutton's receiving yards, which you can find at 54.5, and you like the over. Talk to us a little bit about why you like the over 54.5 on Courtland Sutton.
Yeah, coming off a 17-yard game against Sauce Gardner where we expected him to kind of underwhelm. The last time that Sutton has been held to 55 or fewer yards in back-to-back games, you have to go back a full calendar year to last time that happened. But the reason we like him is that the Giants are playing man coverage on 37.5% of their defensive snaps. Only the Cleveland Browns play a higher rate of man coverage. Against man coverage, Courtland Sutton has a team-high 28% target share. He's also been targeted at 29% of his routes against man coverage. And against the man coverage, he has a 35% first read target share per fantasy points data. The Giants have faced a number of big body receivers like Courtland Sutton this year. George Pickens had 68 yards against them. Quentin Johnston, 98 yards. A.J. Brown last week, 80 yards. I gave you the analysis of why I think he gets there. This one also has a little bit of narrative put on top here. This weekend, the Denver Broncos are inducting Demaryius Thomas into their Ring of Honor this weekend. Demaryius Thomas's last season with the Denver Broncos was 2018 when they drafted Courtland Sutton. And he's talked about how much Demaryius Thomas meant to him when he was drafted as a rookie, and his development, of getting him on track. Demaryius Thomas was traded midway through that season. And I know he wants to have a big game on the same day that Demaryius Thomas' family is going to be there. So a sprinkle of narrative, which I very rarely do. That's why I gave you the analysis first, but one little bit extra, a cherry on top there for Courtland Sutton.
That never hurts at all. I fully buy into reading up on some of these props, and if you're especially going a little bit harder on them, you might as well make sure every
Remember the David Montgomery one 2 weeks ago.
Exactly. Yeah, the David Montgomery one, and there was a lot of different ways to incorporate Montgomery there, and that came through for us. So let's see if we get Demaryius Thomas Ring of Honor narrative street as part of the Courtland Sutton over here. Last but not least, we're going to finish up with a tight end receiving prop over for the New York Jets, something Justin Fields. Obviously, they don't really have very many options. I'm sure that's part of your analysis in this one. Justin Fields, certainly not a guy that you love betting overs on, feel very confident. But in this case, you got a great matchup and just a team that's depleted at their top receiver position. So talk to us a little bit about why you like Mason Taylor over the 41.5 receiving yards right now.
Yeah, betting a Jets passing over. What could ever go wrong here? But yeah, we start there. First of all, we're removing 34% of the team targets and 46% of the air yards. It's the second and third highest rates in the NFL with Garrett Wilson not playing. Also, as we're recording this, Josh Reynolds hasn't practiced yet this week. Alan Lazard doesn't know if he's going to be able to play due to personal reasons. So it's really set up for Mason Taylor, who is already, second on the team in targets over this past month, to be kind of their lead wide receiver. He's also coming off of that Denver debacle, but prior to that, he had 67 yards and 65 yards while Garrett Wilson was playing. In those past 2 weeks, we've seen him now be on the field for 85% of the dropbacks, 86% of the dropbacks. He's a full-time player. We saw him take advantage of two softer matchups before the Denver matchup against Miami and Dallas. He had 26% and 27% of the team targets in those matchups while Garrett Wilson was playing. And he's going against an opponent that has allowed tight ends to have 10.1 yards per target. That is 31st in the NFL. They also, Carolina under Avero is running the third highest rate of cover 3 snaps, 43.5%. And Taylor with Garrett Wilson on the field was already second on the team in targets against those coverages at 19% of the team targets. So if we can get that up a little bit higher too, there's just more run out here. I think this one too, I would take like up to 50 to 60 yards in this game as well. So he's going to be their lead target.
We love that. I like betting on props where it does have a little bit of a higher ceiling above it so that you can get some upside when you do decide to ladder it. So he fits a nice sweet spot here at the 40.5. So let's hope we can make it 3 for 3 this week with Mason Taylor over his 40.5 receiving yards. All right, Rich. All of Rich's great analysis is over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. You can find his game previews and his worksheets up there. You can find his detailed DFS analysis, which will drop over the weekend. So make sure that you guys are just hitting refresh over at Sharp Football Analysis, or check out the fantasy package as well with some of Rich's great content. Thanks for joining us, and good luck this weekend. Now joining me is our referee expert, Joe Gibbs. As a reminder, Joe Gibbs has outstanding write-ups every single week over at sharpfootballanalysis.com, breaking down several of the biggest games with some of the biggest referee edges or tidbits. He also tackles a lot of the other games just about the referees and their crews and some of their tendencies. So I highly recommend you go over to the website and dig in a little bit more there. Today, we're going to talk about two games. The first one up, Joe, is going to be the big battle in the NFC East between the Washington Commanders and the Dallas Cowboys. Washington is laying 1.5 points on the road, as we see here over at our Odds Jam screen. And the interesting part about this game, Joe, is that neither of these teams, we're entering week 7, neither of these teams actually have a winning record. Now, it wasn't a surprise that the Dallas Cowboys don't have a winning record at this point in time because they were expected to have a down year. But the Washington Commanders certainly were expected to be better than 3-3, which is what they are right now. Short road favorites. This game is being officiated by Alex Kemp. What does he bring to the call, in your opinion?
Okay, so straight off the bat, divisional home teams in Alex Kemp's career, 15-22 against the spread. This is an interesting one, and I mentioned it to you Alex Kemp. It doesn't really affect the game. It's just one of those things I've kept track of, and it hasn't changed. Favorites. So game time favorites with Alex Kemp dating back to the start of the 2024 season, 22-1 straight up, 18-5 against the spread. That's an historic run for favorites with one referee. So the one loss was the Cleveland Browns at the New Orleans Saints last year. I think it was like week 13. The Browns were a 1-point favorite at the Saints. They ended up losing the game. That's the only loss the favorites had since the start of the 24 season with Kemp officiating. As far as his points of emphasis, he hasn't changed a whole lot over the years. He's more of a offensive-friendly referee. This season, 43% of his penalties are on the offense. Obviously a higher percentage on the defense. In the area of awarding first downs via penalty, this crew ranks number 1 so far through 6 weeks of awarding defensive automatic first downs via penalty. The Commanders and the Cowboys both rank in the top 5 as beneficiaries of automatic first downs via penalty. Third down plays, no officiating crew has called more defensive penalties on third down plays than Alex Kemp's. So those are some of the key points to watch. Now, Kemp's been one of the best over referees since the start of his career in 2018, about 57% over since he's come into the league. The weird part this year, and another strange thing, he's 6-0 to the under. Now, you look at the penalty numbers and the way he officiates the game, it's still very offensive friendly, and it's hard to explain. The only thing I can say is on special teams plays, they are calling more holding on special teams plays than they have in previous years. And so what that does, obviously, on kick returns, it pushes back the field position, longer fields. And so it hasn't his penalty style hasn't correlated with overs as much this season. But going on some of the numbers I've just read through here, I mean, I like the over again on Sunday. I wrote about this game on sharpfootballanalysis.com. I think the over is the obvious play. From a side point of view, I still favor Washington over Dallas simply because I think Dan Quinn's got enough of an edge, understanding what Dallas does from his time there, and that gives Washington just a slight edge on the game Sunday.
That is a crazy stat. 22-1 in his last 23 games are favorites with Alex Kemp. Obviously, this line is a very short road favorite, and I'm not sure what this injury is going to have to do or in terms of like moving the line, but it was just announced that Terry McLaurin were at Thursday. He's still not at practice for the Washington Commanders. And typically speaking, when you have a player who has not played a game for a couple of weeks due to an injury, he's got to get out there more than just like one day that last week before the game starts to feel good about him playing. So he's still not even practicing on a Thursday. That's really not a good sign that he's going to be available for the team this upcoming weekend. So Washington, once again, will have to get it done on the road with a litany of other guys, unheralded guys stepping up for Jaden Daniels. Now, this next game, Joe, is really fascinating because there's some ripple effect or trickle down effect from what we saw last week. This is where I want to start with you. The Detroit Lions are taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is a game in Detroit. Right now, that line is the Lions laying 5.5. The total is sitting at around 52.5 at most spots. I do see a rogue 53. ESPN is all the way up at 53.5. So obviously, if you're looking to bet the over, you don't want to do it over here at ESPN. But Joe, on this one, the Lions definitely, and their fans certainly, because it's been nonstop on X this week, they feel like they got screwed last week by the referees, and specifically with the league office in New York City on Park Avenue, potentially calling in to the refs that were on the field, explaining that play and the way that Jared Goff went under center briefly, and then he needed to actually come to a stop to make that pass play legal to him. And then they threw the flag like over 60 seconds after they had ruled a touchdown on that play. What is your awareness of the fact that the league does call in to the officials on the sideline there and on the field of play and notify them of different things that they're picking up on to help those refs on the field call it correctly, let's say, because the league tends to deny this never happens, which seems ludicrous to me because I have heard retired referees interviewed saying that this does happen and that they do get assistance at times from Park Avenue. So talk to us a little bit about your understanding as to what actually happens.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is, I mean, you kind of explained it right there. They say they don't, but they do. It's all these conflicting messages. And then you have Dan Campbell go on a show saying the referees told him one thing and then someone told him another. It just creates confusion, and it really just adds fuel to the fire of all the conspiracy talk. And, you know, the NFL is their own worst enemy in that respect. There needs to be more transparency. I mean, you've mentioned it with the ACC crew where you noticed that there was you heard the talk between the review committee and the referee. I'm originally from Australia, and I go over there. I watch the National Rugby League, and they have the same thing. The on-field officials, if there's a review, they talk to someone back in wherever they are doing the review. So you're hearing the conversation.
And that's broadcast. That's broadcast. Yes. You can hear.
Yes, you're hearing the conversation between the two parties. And even with that, there's still controversies. People still complain. But the point is, you are hearing stuff. The NFL, you don't know what's going on. You just – that game last week, I saw Jared Goff score. I walked out of the room to do a couple of things. I come back, my phone's blowing up, and then there's no touchdown. And so there's no transparency throughout the whole process, and it just creates more confusion. And the NFL, look, just tell us what's going on. Have more transparency with the interaction between New York and the on-field referees, and then that squashes a lot of the issues here.
Yeah, the replay assist I thought was a great invention for them to not have to get a coach's challenge, not have to go to the sideline. They could just get a quick buzz in the ear from a replay assistant to make a quick tweak or alteration. Was it a first down? Wasn't a first down? Just update some things like that. Did he get 2 feet in? Nope, it's an incompletion. Okay, fine. Like, move on. That was a great invention and aspect to the game that got incorporated within the last year or so. I don't understand why they don't make this very transparent. The way that the ACC games do it, some of the nationally televised ones, is they actually show you footage of the ACC war room with all of the officials. I think it's in Charlotte, North Carolina, somewhere like that. And they've got all their monitors and they're crowded around it. And then you can hear the ref who goes to the sideline looking at a screen, and the communication back and forth with the replay assist and the referee who's at the game looking at his replay. They broadcast that live on air, so you can hear all their different opinions. And I think the big issue for us as fans, and this is why I wasn't that upset about what happened, is we want it to be right. We don't want there to be things that are happening that are illegal or should have been caught or shouldn't have happened or should have been penalized, should have been touchdowns versus not touchdowns. We want the right plays or the right calls to be made on the field so that the teams know that the game is being cleanly officiated and it's not being influenced or have any type of bias whatsoever. And so, but if they just made it a little bit more transparent as to how they're ensuring that they're trying to make the right calls at all times, which is why I'm in favor of replay assist, which is why I'm in favor of the buzzing in and from Park Avenue, but having that broadcast on air so that we know what exactly they're doing. Because otherwise there's going to be, like you said, conspiracy, they're only doing this because it takes away a touchdown for the Chiefs. Let's decide not to call it. Obviously, that's not what's happening in terms of what the dialogue is in this game. There was a real rule that was violated, so they wanted to take the touchdown off the board, but they got to figure out a better process. I 100% agree. Okay, let's get into this game, though. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Detroit Lions. The game is being officiated by John Hussey. The Lions are up in arms thinking that they got screwed. Is John Hussey a home field ref? Is he going to help out? Was he assigned to this game potentially as a result of that prior game, and now he's going to be a little bit more biased to help the Detroit Lions because the game is in Detroit? What's your take on Hussey's involvement in this one?
Yeah, well, on the surface, you would assume that that's the case. The league says they make these assignments way in advance, but it seems a little bit of a coincidence that Hussey's on this game right after that game last Sunday night. So home teams with John Hussey dating back to 2016, 105-48 straight up, 69%. 91, 56, and 5 against the spread, 62%. That's the best home field record of any referee over that time frame. So the Lions themselves in the Dan Campbell era, 4-2 straight up with Hussey. However, only 2 of those games were played in Detroit. Both were primetime contests. Detroit is 2-0 straight up in those, 1-1 against the spread. So there's some oversight as far as Hussey as a referee. His points of emphasis, the all-important offensive holding false start combination. I talk about it every week. His crew currently ranks 3rd in overall percentage of penalties called in those 2 categories. And so that's big because Tampa Bay is one of the most penalized teams in those 2 categories. About 50% of their penalties come via false start and offensive holding. Conversely, the Lions are one of the least penalized offenses in the NFL. In fact, only the Steelers have committed fewer penalties per game than Detroit through 6 weeks of the season. Other points of emphasis, Hussey, discipline-related penalties. And this is big on primetime. Now, I hate these penalties on sportsmanlike conduct and taunting in particular, and also unnecessary roughness. This crew goes above and beyond enforcing those. In fact, over the last about 6 years, no crew has called more unsportsmanlike conduct and taunting penalties than John Hussey. So just keep that in mind for both teams on Sunday night. You know, you got guys like Jameson Williamson who like to showboat a bit. Well, he better be careful with this crew. The game itself, I mean, I like teams that are going into a bye, and I think they have a pretty good record this season as well. Small sample size, of course. But the Lions, they want to wipe away the bad taste from last week and also go into the bye on a high note. I mean, Tampa Bay's been unbelievable, but they seem to be walking on a knife's edge, and it's late-game heroics from Baker Mayfield that has kept them in a lot of games and won a lot of games. And maybe it happens again this year, but, you know, Detroit at home, Hussey's the referee. All the penalty indicators point to the Lions here. And so I'd have to roll with Detroit at home on Monday night.
Yeah, it is fascinating, Hussey, being on this game. Your note on all of the unsportsmanlike penalties. I think another guy who needs to watch out a little bit, though he's awesome for the sport of football, Baker Mayfield. I mean, what I can just envision him taking one of those big runs, celebrating a little bit, and then this crew throwing a flag against him on something to saying it's unsportsmanlike, wiping off a massive play. Baker is just so fun to watch, and he gets so into the games, but you never really know what he might end up doing at the end of one of those fun runs that he tends to have at least once a game. So this is going to be a fun Monday Night Football game, Joe. We've got back-to-back Monday night games. It should be pretty entertaining. So a lot to look forward to this weekend. The day will start early on Sunday with another game over in London and end late. And then we got back-to-back Monday night games. So a lot of football in our future. It's going to be a fun weekend. Thanks for joining us as always. And guys, don't forget, more of Joe's excellent analysis is over at sharpfootballanalysis.com for your reading pleasure. Make sure you go check it out. Don't forget, you can get a free 2-week trial for OddsJam, the odds screen that we use on our show. Just click the link in the description below to claim the offer. This is the tool that I use to research and find props I want to bet each week. Just click the link below to try it for free for 2 weeks. Today's show has been absolutely outstanding, packed with best bets from multiple experts in their field. But now it's my turn. It's my turn to give you my Novig value of the week. Look, we had a loss last week. We're back to 5-1 on the year. We're 27-10, at 73% since I started doing this. I don't like the taste of losing. We're going to be getting back on the winning track, hopefully this week. And we're turning to one of the biggest animals in the NFL to help us achieve that goal. We're going to Cam Skattebo, and we're going to be looking at his receiving yardage. Now, right now, you can get this at 14.5 minus 123 at Novig. The market for the most part is around 16.5, but this is where you definitely want to have an odds screen like an OddsJam to be able to hunt and peck. And I absolutely would be looking to bet this at Novig if I were you, and you should be looking to take advantage of that as well. You can click the link in the description below to get a $100 match when you open up an account. Just jump on board with that link below, and you can get this over at Novig. So what's to like about this one? Well, first and foremost, if you look at Cam Skattebo, in his 2 games that they have lost where he has gotten more share of touches and snaps, which would be starting in week 3, he had 8 targets against the Kansas City Chiefs and 7 targets against the New Orleans Saints. He turned those into 6 receptions in each game. One game he totaled 45 yards. One game he totaled 61 yards. I feel like this is a nice number that we're getting for two reasons. Number one, he is off of only catching 2 passes last week for 12 yards against the Eagles. But that was a game that they had a lot of success running the football, and they won 34-17. So the market went down a little bit on Cam Skatteboo's receiving yardage line. And in addition, right, they brought back some of the other backs. So they have a full stable in their backfield, a full complement of running backs. And therefore, maybe the thought process is, hey, Cam Skattebo is not going to have as much opportunity in this game. I really think that Cam Skattebo is going to be out on the field at a fairly high rate. And I think that they're not going to have the opportunity to run the ball nearly as often for two reasons. Number one, game state. They're a 7-point underdog here. It's a lot different being a 7-point underdog on the road than it is being a short underdog at home in a couple of these other games that they've been able to pull off wins. Number two, we're looking at a running back who is going up in a great matchup against the Denver Broncos pass defense versus running backs. We've seen backs have success in this type of spot. We think Cam Skattebo is going to have success here as well. Now, if you are not a subscriber to the website at sharpfootballanalysis.com, you might be seeing this video a little bit delayed because we take time to post it. And so you might be seeing a number when you're watching this video that's closer to 17.5 across the board, because we have just sent this out to our subscribers, which I'm going to do in a little bit after we finish recording all the content for the videos and take a little break. I'll send out some of these. If that is the case, I still like it. I still like this over for Cam Skattebo. They might be without Darius Slayton. This is a clear edge, matchup edge, one of the few actual matchup edges that exist against the Denver Broncos defense. It's going to be hard to run the ball. It's going to be hard to throw to outside receivers. It's going to be hard to throw and have a lot of success to tight ends. But running backs do have some success against the Denver Broncos. So even if this number is a little bit higher, I still think that there is value because I see some upside in Cam Skattebo. Now, the alternative is just bet his longest reception over. Right now, that's at 9.5. You could go that route. Actually, I saw 8.5, but it wasn't posted at a lot of spots. I saw 8.5. It was 9.5 earlier today, dropped down to 8.5. Actually, I would take the longest reception over if that's the alternative. So this is the Novig Value play of the week. As a reminder, click the Novig link in the description of the show below to get your $100 match when you open a new account. And let's hope that we win this one and go to 6-1 on the season, 28-10 over the last 2 years. And that'll do it for the Week 7 Sharp Football Analysis Show, the fastest growing sports betting podcast on the planet. Make sure that you guys are subscribed over on YouTube or on your favorite podcast apps so you never miss any more updates or episodes. And we'll see you guys soon.